All right, Brandy, it's time to talk about a coach that you mentioned a couple videos back as one of the best in the business of college basketball right now. I think you might have said the best, actually. Rick Pitino over there at St. John's. They've been on a tear lately. They just won again last night to clinch a share of the Big East title. They've got their highest AP ranking since 1991 to 1992 season. Rick, he's on a roll. He's found himself over there at St. John's. Year two of Rick Pitino, it seems to always be the time where he gets things clicking with programs, and he's shown it again this year because this squad's looking like possibly a Final Four dark horse, and they're kind of running away with the Big East, truthfully.
Yeah, and I don't think that they want just a share of it either. RJ Lewis made a comment after that game where they clinched it and basically said that, they want it outright. They don't want to have to share it with anybody. So they're definitely motivated from both a coaching and player perspective. But what Rick Pitino has been able to do there in just his second season's really impressive. And it can't go unsaid with how amazing of a job that he's done there too, and with the roster that I would say like going into the season wasn't one that was highly regarded by national media the same way that some other rosters were. So it's been really exciting to see. And I don't know if a lot of people would have predicted St. John's to win the Big East heading into the season.
No, definitely not. I mean, going into the season, it seemed like UConn, Marquette was kind of at the forefront of Big East talks. Creighton was kind of in the mix there as well. And Creighton, I mean, rightfully so. They're sitting in second right now, but still, that's 2 games behind St. John's. We obviously know the problems that have been going on at UConn. Marquette, they've been pretty solid so far. They've had some slip ups in Big East play, but overall, they're looking pretty solid as a team. But St. John's, I mean, Rick, he's gotten this thing rolling. I saw a stat today that really provoked me wanting to do this video. He's the first coach in Division One men's basketball history to win a regular season title with 5 different programs, that being Boston, Louisville, Kentucky, Iona, and now St. John's. And I mean, that's just honestly incredible to think about because I don't know if you think the same way, Brandy, but when it comes to the talk of just the all-time great coaches, I mean, Pitino, he gets brought up in conversations, but I don't think he's talked about nearly as highly as he should be because his track record up to this point, it's up there with the cream of the crop when it comes to coaches in college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may have to do with some of the controversy that happened when he was at Louisville. I think that sometimes overshadows how great of an X's and O's coach he is, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I definitely think that he's a little bit underrated. And maybe right now, too, since he's older, his age may have something to do with it, too, when people are having conversations about coaches in the industry. But just that defense wins championships. I feel like we've said that on this podcast before. And the fact that that's kind of what his bread and butter is, I think speaks to that. And the stat that you just threw out about the 5 regular season championships that he's won.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And speaking just to this squad specifically, I mean, there's a lot to like across the board. Just so many talented guys. RJ Lewis, you mentioned his comments. He's one of the better forwards in that conference. Kadari Richmond, he's got such a nice mid-range game. Every time I watch him, I feel like he gets to his spots and he's just automatic. Zuby Ejiofor has been a force in the paint for them all season long. And Devon Smith, he's been a really great guy for them as well. Really coveted transfer out of the portal that Rick managed to get there. So when we look at just this team specifically, Brandy, what is it that makes them just so special to the way that they're playing right now? Because, I mean, obviously they've had some great performances throughout the Big East, but even beyond the Big East, I mean, they had a solid non-conference body of work, and they're rolling into March really as one of the stronger teams in the country. And I would not want to see them if I'm a team that's staring at my part of the bracket. That'd be a little bit of a scary thought for me, at least.
Yeah, I think it has to do with them just being so overwhelming on defense. They rank top 17 in the country and like multiple defensive metrics. They're number 2 in defensive efficiency. They're 8th in the country in blocks per game, 10th in the country in turnovers forced, 15th in the country in steals, and 17th in the country in field goal percentage defense. And I feel like that's the story of this team. But recently, the last, I would say 2 or 3 games, their offense has kind of started to spark a little bit. And so they haven't been super effective on the offensive side of the ball. And Pitino has said this in multiple press conferences this season that they can be basically outshot by teams and still win because they're winning the possession battle. But now I'm curious to kind of see where their ceiling and their peak might be, that they've started really gearing up with this offense. And against UConn, they had, I think they were 8 for 16 from three in the first half
Yep.
against UConn. And so, and when they played against Seton Hall recently too, I feel like their offense was great in that game. So if they can get that offense clicking and on a level that's better than it was to start off the season and has progressed, then I really do see this team being a potential Final Four team, which is crazy because St. John's hasn't made a Sweet 16 this century. So
This century, really?
yeah, it's St. John's and DePaul are the only two
Oh
teams in
my
the Big
goodness.
East that haven't made a Sweet 16 this century. So
Wow. I didn't know that one. You kind of threw me off with that stat. That's really impressive, even more when you think about just where St. John's has been. And they really, I mean, he's brought him back to relevance, truthfully, because before he came in there wasn't a whole lot going on for that program. And just going back to this year, you mentioned how their offense is starting to click, and they've really been putting up good numbers offensively. Their last 3 games, and 2 of those they've scored over 80. UConn, they absolutely lit them up, like you said, from 3. They got hot. The only thing that I really question about this team, and it's starting to look like less of a concern as we see more of a sample size from them, because it seems like the offense is starting to click. But the only thing that does concern me is if they do get cold and they do kind of stall out offensively, I just wonder how far exactly that elite defense can take you if you don't really have the buckets to back that up. But I mean, you mentioned it, defense wins championships. We always say on here, defense travels as well. So when it comes to neutral courts like the Big East tournament and the NCAA tournament, I think that if they get into a game that's really just sloppy and scrappy, they're going to have the edge on a lot of teams. But I just wonder what might happen if they get into a matchup against like a very high-powered offense, if they're going to be able to maintain that pace. I don't know if you reflect that concern, but when I think about this team, that's really all that I worry about right now, and that's the only thing that's keeping me from saying that the sky's the limit for them, to be honest.
yeah, I think that's my concern too, because I know we mentioned how great they were in that UConn game from behind the arc, but on the season they have been pretty bad at shooting threes, and they're super turnover prone too. On top of that, they're just not a good free throw shooting team either. So if they end up, facing off against a high-powered offense, like say in Alabama or in Auburn, they could be in a little bit of trouble there. I would be interested to see them go up against a mid-major who runs a similar style of offense to the two teams I just mentioned. I think that there's possibility they could get caught off guard there. And also the tournament just isn't going to be officiated the same way that the regular season is. They don't let you be as aggressive in March Madness. So I do think just from watching Big East basketball that the officiating there has really let teams play this season in that conference. So yeah, I definitely share the same concern. Like if they go up against a high-powered, high-octane type of offense, like they could get caught just not being able to keep pace. So the name of the game for them and what it has been all season is making teams play at their pace. And that's
Yeah.
really what's been good, except for the UConn game. They kind of just that game, I don't know if it's an anomaly for them, or if we're gonna see some more offense like that in the future. UConn's defense is pretty bad though, so um, part of it too. But we'll see how they do this weekend against Seton Hall, and then they close the season out against Marquette, which that's on the road, so that's not going to be an easy feat for them at all. And that's a pretty decent offense with Marquette, so that game will be interesting.
It definitely will be, and seeing what they do in the Big East tournament is going to be pretty interesting as well. I wanted to talk too really quick just on something long term with St. John's and this program moving forward overall. So there was a quote that Rick had, I think it was probably about a week ago now. We haven't really had the time to discuss it, but they were asking him sort of about the current state of his program and just how exactly he plans on building off of this year. And his answer was pretty interesting. He said that they're not recruiting any high school players right now at all, because his logic behind that is, they're losing Devon Smith, Kadari Richmond, and Aaron Scott. And he said you can't replace them with high school kids, simply put. So you think that that's kind of an interesting strategy moving forward? Like you want to keep sustaining success and building off of this. And obviously college basketball's overall climate has really transitioned more towards experience, transfer portal gets, and whatnot. But you also see, too, in a year like this, you've got star freshmen like Cooper Flagg that's dominating, Con Knipple, and then Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. They're really doing their thing at Rutgers, even though the team doesn't overall have that supporting cast. I just found that quote a little bit interesting moving forward. I'm not so sure if just abandoning high school completely is the right move if you want to keep developing success, because I mean you can get guys in high school and keep them in your program for a couple of years, and that could really pay off long term.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting quote too. I really think though that the key is having a balance of both transfer portal and high school players. That's what a lot of successful teams right now have. So I don't think it's right to fully abandon it, but also this is a coach that has had so much success. So hey, maybe it works in the Big East in that kind of conference. Like honestly, it might work even better at a school where he's at, like at St. John's. And it sounds like their NIL that they have there is really solid too. And a quote this week, with them playing Seton Hall this coming weekend, Kadary Richmond's on St. John's and he used to be on Seton Hall. And there was just a quote out there that basically was like, he loves Seton Hall, loves Shaheen Holloway, and misses his teammates, but the offer that he was receiving from St. John's was just life-changing for him compared to what Seton Hall was going to offer or was offering him. And so Pitino said he's a free agent, just like all free agents, kind of, whenever he was talking about it. And so I think that their NIL is in a really good spot at St. John's. So taking that approach at that kind of school where you're in a conference where I feel like not a ton of like super high 5-star or 4 stars out of high school go to anyways, it almost kind of makes sense to focus on the transfer portal, especially if you have the NIL.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, before we kind of move on from this topic, me and Blake, we put out a video a couple of days back. Coach of the Year talks, the midseason list came out and whatnot. Now, I know that you said a couple videos back that Rick is your Coach of the Year pick. You think he's one of the best in the business right now. Are you stamping that claim here today? Are you standing by that? You think that when this is all said and done, now that he's officially in that list of all those great coaches, that he's going to come away with the award? We'll get a little bit of Coach of the Year talk here for you since you missed out on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really close. If I'm being honest, I think Coach of the Year is between 3 people. I think it's between Bruce Pearl, Rick Pitino, and I almost want to say it's between Kelvin Sampson just because of their record and strength of schedule too, even though maybe isn't getting talked about as much in the media, but Kelvin Sampson squad his university just came into the Big 12 last season. He's about to go back to back Big 12 titles, and they were kind of doubted heading into that conference, even though Houston's known to be a powerhouse in basketball. I've just been really impressed with what Calvin Sampson's done this season too, but I think it's between those 3 coaches. So I don't know who's going to win it, but it's kind of tough when a team is kind of on the brink of potentially breaking quad 1 record for wins on a super historic year in the toughest conference. So I imagine Bruce Pearl might win it, but I think Rick Pitino is certainly in the running for it.
He's done an incredible job, that's for sure. And he said to Adam Zagori, I believe I saw, posted a tweet today, a quote of his from back when he was coaching in Greece before he got back in the college game. He said that he was going to bring St. John's back to an elite level that they hadn't seen since Louis Carnesecca. And man, I mean, it's only taken them 2 years to deliver on that promise to the Johnnies faithful. It's going to be exciting to see what they do going down the stretch here. And like I said, I really think the only concern you have is the offense. And even still, they've been proving that wrong lately with some of their performances. So Slick Rick, he's still got his fastball. That's safe to say. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see how this squad finishes out.
I would love to see in the tournament, I would love to see him play his son's team that he's currently coaching at because Richard, his son, is coaching at New Mexico, and they're currently in first right now in the Mountain West Conference, and they're certainly going to be in the field. So I'm really excited to see the possibility of that happening, and I'm really rooting for that because I think it would be such a fun storyline in March Madness, but really cool father-son duo there, just to add to more Rick Pitino kind of lore.
And both of them were on the midseason Coach of the Year list too. He found his way on there as well, Richard. So that would be a rematch too because they played in November. Right? St. John's,
Yeah.
they won that one first round by 14. But we'll see what happens. St. John's, we're St. John's enthusiasts on this podcast. We love the job that Rick Pitino's done. We'll see what happens going down here in the stretch play of Big East and heading on into March.